Dim the lights. Let the world outside fade for just a moment. Turn on a fan or let the rain tap gently against the window. This isn't just a video, it's an invitation. A journey through time, across continents, into the heart of what makes us human and what terrifies us, what drives us westward, what moves us to sing in the dark. Tonight we dive into three great currents of history. Not the polished tales of kings and empires, but the raw, beating truths beneath. We'll walk the blood-stained stones of ancient Rome, where punishment was spectacle and justice wore a mask of cruelty. We'll ride the creaking wagon wheels of the American frontier, where hope was measured in miles and survival in firewood and grit. And then we'll go deeper, back before nations, before writing, before memory, to the very origin of music, the first sound that said, "We are alive." These are not separate stories. They are threads of the same tapestry, of fear, of courage, of the need to belong, to endure, to express. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. This isn't about numbers, it's about connection. And speaking of connection, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Is it midnight where you are? Dawn? Are you curled up under a blanket or listening on headphones in the quiet after work? It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world, from Tokyo to Toronto, from Nairobi to Norway. All of us for a few minutes listening to the same voice, the same story echoing through time. Now, close your eyes if you dare. Breathe in and let the past begin. Ancient Rome, the theater of cruelty, where justice wore a mask of blood and silence. Close your eyes. Imagine the hush before dawn in ancient Rome. The city stirs beneath a sky still dusted with stars. In the forum the stones are cold, the temples stand silent. But somewhere beneath the earth, in a narrow pit dug deep into the soil, a woman breathes. She is not a criminal. Not in the way we think of one. She is a Vestal Virgin, a guardian of the sacred flame. A woman chosen as a child to serve the goddess Vesta for 30 years, to keep the fire burning, and to remain untouched. But she failed, or was accused of failing, and now she lies in a tomb that is not her own. Above her, workers seal the last stone. A sliver of light vanishes. Darkness swallows her whole. She has bread, a little water, a flickering oil lamp, but no way out, and no blood spilled, because to spill a Vestal's blood would anger the gods. So Rome found a loophole, a punishment that kills the body but preserves divine honor. Buried alive, left to suffocate, to starve, to go mad in the dark. This was not rare, this was policy, and this was only the beginning. The penalty of the sack. When death came with roommates now, picture this. You're tied, hands bound, mouth gagged. You're shoved into a leather sack, thick, dark, suffocating. But you're not alone. With you, a dog, a monkey, a snake, and a rooster. No, this isn't a nightmare. This is Pona Colle, the punishment of the sack, reserved for one crime. Parricide. Killing your father, the Romans didn't just want you dead. They wanted your death to be symbolic, a poetic reckoning. The dog, loyalty you betrayed. The monkey, chaos you unleashed. The snake, the venom in your heart. The rooster, to crow at your final breath. Then, splash, the sack is hurled into the Tiber River, sinking, thrashing, bubbles rising. No one knows how long it took, no one asked. This was justice, Roman style, not swift, not silent, but spectacular. Crucifixion upside down, the martyr who asked for it. We know crucifixion, the cross, the nails, the agony. But in Rome, even suffering could be twisted, literally. When St. Peter was condemned under Nero, he didn't protest. He made a request. Crucify me upside down. I am not worthy to die as my Lord did. And Rome, ever eager to perform, obliged. Imagine the horror of it. Blood rushing to the head, muscles tearing, breathing nearly impossible. Every heartbeat a thunderclap behind the eyes. Yet in that inversion a strange humility was born. An upside-down cross, once a symbol of unworthiness, would centuries later become a mark of rebellion, of metal, of myth. But in that moment on that hill outside Rome, it was just pain and silence, and the slow surrender of a man who believed his death could mean something. Decimation, when your best friend killed you. Now shift to the battlefield. A Roman legion has broken ranks. They fled. They disgraced the eagle. The commander gathers the entire unit, 120 men. They draw lots, 1 in 10. The 9 survivors, your brothers in arms, are handed clubs. And you? You're the one who drew the short straw. They beat you to death, with the same hands that shared your wine, the same voices that cheered beside you in battle. This was decimatio, decimation, a word that once meant 1 in 10 dies. Now it just means destruction. But in Rome it was discipline, a message written in bone and blood. Fail, and your comrades will kill you. And the survivors, they slept outside the camp, ate barley, not wheat, marked not by death but by shame. Damnatio memoria, when the empire erased you. Most punishments ended with the body, but Rome had one that targeted the soul. Damnatio memoria, condemnation of memory. Not just death, but erasure, your name chiseled from stone, your statue shattered, your face scratched from paintings, your achievements reassigned to someone else. Emperor Geta, murdered by his own brother Caracalla, vanished from history. His image hacked from reliefs, his name erased from inscriptions. Even in family portraits, he's gone, a ghost where a man once stood. No grave, no trial, no legacy, just silence. And that silence, that was the most terrifying punishment of all, because in Rome, the worst thing that could happen wasn't dying. It was being forgotten. Narration pauses. Soft, reflective music begins to fade in. So why do we remember these stories? Because they're not just about cruelty. They're about power, about control, about a civilization that turned punishment into theater and fear into order. Rome didn't just rule with law. It ruled with spectacle, with silence, with the unbearable weight of consequence. And in that darkness, we see something unsettling. We are not so different. We don't bury virgins alive. We don't throw men into rivers with snakes. But we still cancel. We still shame. We still erase. The tools have changed. But the instinct remains. Transition hint softly. But now let the stones of Rome fade behind us. Let the blood wash away. Because next we ride west, into the wind, into the unknown. We leave the empire of marble and memory, and step into the dust of the American frontier, where the land is vast, the rules are unwritten, and every mile is paid for in hope and blood. But that story, that begins after the break. The American frontier, where hope was measured in miles and every step was paid for in dust and blood. Close your eyes. Breathe in. Can you smell it? The dry wind sweeping across endless prairie. The faint wood smoke of a campfire, miles from anywhere. The leather of a harness worn soft by sun and sweat. The scent of damp wool blankets wrapped around a child shivering under a sky too big to comprehend. This is the American frontier. Not a place on a map, not just a time in history, but a state of mind. A dream whispered in taverns, preached from pulpits, carved into the hearts of those who believed the land behind them had nothing left to offer. But the land ahead? The land ahead held everything. The covered wagon, hope on wheels. Before there were highways, before there were towns, there were wagons. Not the polished carriages of the East, not the royal coaches of Europe. No, this was something raw, something real. The prairie schooner, so named because its billowing white canvas top looked like a ship's sail cutting across oceans of grass. But this ship didn't carry spices or gold. It carried everything: flour, beans, salted pork, a Bible, a cast-iron skillet, a spinning wheel, a box of seeds, and sometimes a single photograph, the last image of a home now gone. Inside, families slept. Under it, they sheltered. Beside it, they walked, mile after blistering mile. And the oxen? They were the true heroes, slow, stubborn, unbreakable. They didn't care about manifest destiny. They just kept moving. Because once the wheels turned, there was no going back. The house was sold, the land was left, and the only thing ahead was the trail. Life on the trail, dust, death, and dried beans. The trail wasn't adventure. It was routine. Wake before dawn. Yoke the oxen, patch the wagon, check the children. Boil the water, if you could find it. 10 to 15 miles a day. If the weather held, if the river wasn't flooded, if no one fell sick, and someone always did, cholera, dysentery, typhoid. Water that looked clear could kill you in hours. A single misstep near a river bank could sweep a child away. Snakes, wolves, frostbite, and grief, quiet, constant, unrelenting. You learn to bury fast, to mourn on your feet, to keep walking. But it wasn't all suffering. There were moments of joy. Weddings under open skies, births in the shadow of a wagon wheel, children laughing as they skipped along the ruts carved by thousands before them. At night the wagons circled, not for Indians as the myths would have it, but for wind, for wolves, for the cold. A fire crackled. Someone pulled out a fiddle. And for a few hours the vastness didn't feel so empty. Music pushed back the silence. Laughter defied the loneliness. And for a moment you remembered why you came. Homesteading, the first winter after weeks, after months, after the Rockies, the deserts, the endless plains. You found it. Land flat open yours. You fell to your knees. Not in prayer, though you would soon, but in exhaustion, in disbelief. And then came the real work. No pre-built homes, no hardware stores, no blueprints, just trees, an axe, and the ticking clock of the seasons. You cut logs, you hauled them, you raised a cabin, one room, dirt floor, holes for windows covered in greased paper. You called it home. But the first winter would test that claim. Snow came early. Firewood ran low. Food spoiled. And the wind, The wind howled like it wanted you gone. You coughed through smoke from a chimney that didn't work. You fed the children corn, mush, and hope. And when a neighbor appeared on the horizon, you didn't ask their name, you handed them bread. Because on the frontier, survival wasn't about strength. It was about community. One family couldn't last, but 10 might. Frontier women, the true backbone. We remember the cowboys, the sheriffs, the outlaws, but the real pioneers, they wore aprons. Frontier women were builders, farmers, doctors, teachers, warriors, all in one. They woke before dawn to milk cows, churn butter, and bake bread. They planted gardens, they butchered hogs. They delivered babies, their own and their neighbors'. And when the men were gone or didn't come back, they picked up the rifle. There are stories of women fending off wolves with a shovel, of mothers teaching their children to read by firelight, of women who buried 3 children before the age of 30 and still had dinner on the table by sundown. They didn't just survive the silence. They filled it with songs, with lessons, with quilts stitched from scraps of the old life. And when towns finally rose from the dust, it was often the women who demanded schools, libraries, churches, law. They weren't side characters. They were the foundation. So the next time you picture the Wild West, don't just see a man on a horse. See a woman, sleeves rolled up, shotgun by the door, and a pot of cornbread in the oven. Because for every mile the wagon rolled, she was already there. The indigenous perspective, a land already occupied. But we cannot tell this story, any story of the frontier, without acknowledging the truth. The land was not empty. It had been home for thousands of years to the Cherokee, the Lakota, the Comanche, the Navajo, nations with languages, laws, sacred sites, and stories older than the United States itself. They hunted the buffalo. They followed the seasons. They lived in balance with the land. But to the settlers, this wasn't home. It was opportunity. And so began the unraveling. Treaties were signed, then broken, again and again. Tribes were pushed west, then pushed again, forced onto reservations, barren, distant, far from ancestral grounds. Children were taken, sent to boarding schools where they were punished for speaking their own language, where they were told their culture was savage, and when resistance came, with spears, with courage, with love for their land, it was met with bullets. Sand Creek, Wounded Knee, the Trail of Tears. The frontier wasn't just a dream. For many, it was a nightmare. And yet, through it all, indigenous peoples survived. Their songs were sung in secret. Their languages whispered. Their stories passed down like living fire. The myth of the frontier often forgets this. But the truth remains. Westward expansion was not a triumph for all. For many, it was a slow, devastating march of loss. To understand the frontier, we must hold both truths at once: the courage of the pioneers and the tragedy of those they displaced. Frontier justice, law, outlaws, and legend. On the frontier, law didn't arrive with a judge. It arrived with a gun. There were no courts, no jails, no police, so justice was made on the spot. Vigilantes formed. Trials were held under trees. Guilty men were hanged by dawn. Eventually, sheriffs came, men like Wyatt Earp, Wild Bill Hickok. Some were brave. Some were crooked. Most were both. And with law came outlaws. Billy the Kid, Jesse James, Butch Cassidy. Men who robbed banks, trains, and stagecoaches, and became legends in the process. Newspapers turned them into folk heroes. Ballads were sung, myths were born, but justice was uneven. A man could hang for stealing a horse, or walk free after murder if he had friends in the right places. Still, slowly order came. Courthouses replaced saloons. Prisons replaced tree limbs. And the myth of the lone lawman, armed, dusty, unflinching, was born. The railroad and the telegraph, the end of isolation. For years the frontier moved at the speed of a wagon wheel, slow, creaky, weather permitting, but then the whistle. The Transcontinental Railroad, completed in 1869, connected the East to the West in a steel embrace. Journeys that took months now took days. Goods arrived, medicine came. Letters reached families in weeks, not years. And with the railroad came the telegraph, a thin wire humming with dots and dashes, carrying news across the prairie in minutes. Isolation, the great fear of the pioneer, was dying. Towns boomed. Cities rose. The wilderness was no longer wild. But not everyone welcomed it. Indigenous tribes saw rails and wires as invasion. They sabotaged lines. They fought back. But progress rolled on. The iron horse was unstoppable. The closing of the frontier. By 1890, the U.S. Census made a quiet announcement. The frontier line has disappeared. The great push westward was over. The land was mapped, measured, sold. The buffalo were nearly gone. Tribes were confined. The dream had been realized, and the myth had begun. Historian Frederick Jackson Turner would later argue, the frontier shaped the American soul. It taught us grit, self-reliance, democracy, but the reality was Messier. It was hope and horror, courage and cruelty. And today, the frontier doesn't exist on a map, but it lives in the spirit, in the idea that we can always go farther, dig deeper, dream bigger. The wagons don't roll anymore. The cabins are museums. The trails are highways. But if you stand in the prairie at dusk, when the wind whispers through the tall grass, and the sky burns orange and purple, you can still hear them. The creak of wood, the groan of leather, the quiet hum of a mother singing a lullaby to a child who will grow up to tell this story. The American frontier didn't vanish, it became the foundation. Narration fades, soft music begins to swell. So what do we take from this? That history is never just one story. It's layers, contradictions, echoes. And as we prepare to leave the frontier behind and step into our final journey, the origin of music, remember this. We are not so different from those who came before. We still seek. We still suffer. We still sing. But that story begins after the break. The origins and evolution of music. Close your eyes. Breathe in. Can you hear it? Not the hum of your computer, not the distant sirens or the wind outside, but deeper, the quiet rhythm of your own pulse, a breath, a sigh, a foot tapping, almost without thought. That's where it began, not with strings, not with flutes, not with notation or concert halls. It began with the body, with a hand striking skin, a foot stomping earth, a voice rising from the chest, not in words but in tone. Before language, before fire, before the wheel, there was music, and tonight we go back to the beginning, to the first time a human heard a sound and decided to repeat it on purpose. The first instrument was the human body. Long before instruments, before caves were painted, before we even called ourselves human, we made music. We clapped. We stomped. We clicked our tongues. We snapped our fingers. We hummed, and we listened, because something in that sound, that rhythm, spoke to us. It wasn't just noise. It was connection. Imagine a small group of early humans huddled around a fire. The night is cold. Predators watch from the dark. One of them begins to tap, slow, steady, on a hollow log. Another joins in, then another. A rhythm forms. It's not a song. Not yet, but it's order and chaos, a shared heartbeat. And then a voice, a low hum, a rising tone. It's not speech. It's not a warning. It's something else. It's feeling. And in that moment, something changes. They are no longer just surviving. They are together. Anthropologists believe music may have come before language, that we didn't speak first. We sang. Because infants, even today, respond more to melody than to words. They calm to lullabies. They smile at rhythm. They feel before they understand. So perhaps music isn't something we invented. Perhaps it's something we remembered, a deep biological instinct, hardwired into our bones, passed down from the very first voices in the dark. And the most beautiful part, music wasn't for the gifted. It wasn't for kings or priests. It was for everyone. Wherever there were hands, voices, and something to strike, music was made. In Africa, in Asia, in Europe, on every continent, the same truth emerged. We are not alone when we make sound together. The bone flute, humanity's first melody. Now step into the Ice Age, 40,000 years ago. Europe is a frozen wilderness. Mammoths roam. Glaciers carve the land. And in a cave in what is now Germany, someone picks up a vulture's wing bone. They don't eat it. They don't throw it away. They bore holes into it, precise, evenly spaced, with tools made of stone. Then they blow. And from that bone, a note, clear, haunting, intentional. This is not chance. This is music. Archaeologists have found flutes like this, made from bird bones, mammoth ivory, and they're not simple. They're tuned. They play multiple notes. They were crafted, not found, which means someone looked at a bone and saw not food, but possibility. And someone else heard that sound and said, again, these flutes predate agriculture, the wheel, writing. They are among the oldest human inventions, not for survival, but for beauty, and they suggest something profound. Even in the harshest conditions, even when every day was a fight for life, humans still made time for art. Because music wasn't a luxury, it was a need, a way to honor the dead, to call the gods, to calm a child, to say, we are here, we feel, we remember. And when that flute echoed through the cave, it wasn't just sound. It was the first concert in human history, and we've been playing ever since. The drum, the heartbeat of humanity. If the flute was our first voice, then the drum was our first heartbeat. It didn't come from one place. It came from everywhere, because the drum is simple. Stretch skin over a hollow, strike it, feel the pulse. And feel it we did. In Africa, drums spoke languages, tonal, rhythmic, complex, mimicking human speech to send messages across valleys. A drum could say, the chief is coming, or beware, enemies near, or dance, the harvest is good. In Siberia, shamans used drums to enter trance. their rhythms unlocking doors to the spirit world. The drum wasn't just an instrument, it was a vehicle. In the Amazon, water drums echoed through the jungle, thunder made by human hands. In ancient Mesopotamia, temple drums called worshippers to prayer. In war, drums unified armies. In birth, they celebrated life. In death, they mourned. The drum didn't just keep time. It created time. It marked seasons, harvests, rituals, transitions. And always it said the same thing: we are one. Because when a group moves to the same beat, something shifts. Individuals become a tribe. Strangers become a community. The drum didn't just sound, it connected. And to this day, when we hear a strong beat, our feet tap. Our heads nod, our hearts sink, because we are still wired to answer the call of the drum. Mesopotamia. Where music became sacred as humans built cities, music grew with them. Nowhere was this more clear than in Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. Here, music wasn't just ritual, it was royalty. In the city of Ur, over 4,500 years ago, archaeologists found the bull-headed lyre, a harp buried with a noble woman, its face crowned with gold, its body inlaid with lapis lazuli. This wasn't just an instrument, it was a treasure, a bridge to the gods. These early harps had no frets, no keys, just strings plucked by hand. Their sound was soft, dreamlike, like incense hanging in the air. And music was no longer just for the people, it was for the afterlife. Harps were buried with the dead, so their souls would be accompanied in the next world. Musicians were painted on tomb walls, still playing even in death, because the Mesopotamians believed something powerful. Music doesn't end when we do. And for the first time, music became structured. Scales were recorded in cuneiform. Temple musicians were trained. Harmony was studied. Music was no longer just feeling. It was knowledge. And with a wooden frame and a few strings, humanity gave voice to silence. Ancient Egypt, music as divine language. In Egypt, music wasn't art, it was worship. According to myth, it was the goddess Hathor, goddess of joy, love, and music, who first brought song into the world. And so music became sacred. Priests chanted hymns to the gods. Workers sang as they built the pyramids. Fishermen called to the Nile with melody. The most iconic instrument, the sistrum, a rattle with metal rods, shaken during rituals to awaken the divine, to ward off evil, to guide the soul. Women played frame drums in childbirth and funerals, moments of beginning and end. Harps, curved and elegant, were played in temples and courts, their strings believed to echo the harmony of the cosmos. And in tombs you'll find paintings of musicians, still playing thousands of years later, because the Egyptians believed music was eternal. It honored the gods. It comforted the dead. It reminded the living, you are part of something greater. In Egypt, to make music was to echo the sacred. To sing was to pray. Ancient Greece, music as science and philosophy. While Egypt saw music as divine, Greece saw it as mathematical. Enter Pythagoras. Yes, the triangle guy. But he didn't just study shapes, he studied sound. Legend says he passed a blacksmith's shop and noticed. The hammers made different tones based on their weight. He tested it with strings and found simple ratios create harmony. This was revolutionary. He called it the harmony of the spheres. The idea that the planets moved in musical ratios, that the universe itself was a grand vibrating instrument. To the Greeks, music wasn't just emotion, it was cosmic order. Plato believed certain musical modes could shape the soul. One for courage, one for peace, one for sorrow. He even warned, the wrong music could corrupt a city, so music was education, medicine, morality, and the lyre, small, portable, elegant, became a symbol of civilization. Poets like Homer and Sappho held it in their hands. Soldiers marched to aloes, a double reed pipe. Philosophers taught with melody. In Greece, music became a bridge between reason and emotion, between numbers and beauty. It wasn't just sound. It was thought made audible. Ancient Rome. Music is power and spectacle. If Greece gave music its soul, Rome gave it volume. In Rome, music wasn't for meditation. It was for control. On the battlefield, the cornu, a curved brass horn, blasted commands across chaos. The tuba, straight, piercing, called troops to charge or retreat. Music kept the army in sync. It was psychological warfare. 10,000 soldiers marching to the same beat? That's not just discipline. That's fear. In the arena, music announced the games, like a national anthem before battle. At banquets, the hydraulis, an early water-powered organ, played for emperors and elites. Rome borrowed from Greece, Egypt, Judea, Gaul, and turned music into a tool of empire. It was entertainment, propaganda, spectacle. But unlike the Greeks, Romans didn't write about music theory. They didn't analyze it. They used it. For Rome, sound wasn't a mystery. It was a means. And in the end, Rome didn't refine music, it amplified it, until even the farthest provinces heard the beat of the empire. India and China, music as cosmic order. While the West marched to war, the East turned inward. In India, music was spiritual, rooted in the Vedas, the oldest sacred texts, where hymns were meant to be sung, not read. The Sama Veda contains chants and precise melodic patterns. Sama, designed to elevate consciousness, to align the soul with the universe. Instruments like the veena and mridangam became sacred, played not for fame, but for meditation. Every raga, a melodic framework, was tied to a time of day, a season, an emotion. Music wasn't for entertainment. It was discipline, a path to the divine. In China, music was political. The legendary Emperor Shun was said to have harmonized the empire through music. Confucius believed proper music created moral citizens. Disorderly music led to rebellion. The guqin, a 7-stringed zither, was played by scholars in silence, its soft tones reflecting introspection. The sheng, a mouth-blown reed, symbolized unity, its many pipes working as one. Music was tuned to natural cycles, aligned with the heavens, balanced the state. In both India and China, music wasn't separate from life. It was life, a mirror of the cosmos, a code of harmony. Why music endures. So why has music survived 40,000 years? Why does a melody from the Andes move someone in Norway? Why do soldiers sing in war? Why do mothers hum lullabies to crying babies? Because music speaks a language without words. It doesn't need translation. It doesn't care about borders. It bypasses the mind and goes straight to the heart. Science now confirms what ancient people knew. Music alters brain waves, reduces stress, triggers memory. Alzheimer's patients, when words are gone, still hum old songs. Trauma is soothed by rhythm. Joy is amplified by melody. We've turned music into therapy, protest, worship, business, love. But its core remains rhythm, tone, expression. It adapts, it survives, it evolves. But the feeling, that hasn't changed, because long before we had stories to tell, we had sound, and sound made us human. Soft music swells, then gently fades out, so as the night grows quiet, and the world outside slows, remember this, the next time you hear a song, a drum, a hum, a whistle, you're not just hearing music, you're hearing history, you're hearing survival, you're hearing the echo of the first human who tapped a log and said, "Again," and in that sound we are all connected, across time, across space, across silence, because music never left us. We carry it in our blood, in our breath, in our bones, and as long as we live, we will keep making it. Thank you for listening, for being here, for letting the past speak. If this moved you, please subscribe, but only if it felt real, and tell me in the comments, what song first made you feel something? When did music become more than sound? Because in the end, this isn't just my story, it's ours. Until next time, keep listening.